A whole new global talk show, Newstellers. Let's meet our panelists. How have you guys been?
It's been a tough week.
Yes, I'm sure. Let's talk about the recent terror attacks in France. Shootings and explosions in 6 locations across the city left nearly 130 people dead and 90 seriously injured. So, Fred, as a French native, you must be in a state of deep shock right now. Are all your friends and family okay?
Yeah, my friends and family are physically okay. Now there is more the psychological trauma of continuing to live, and
I'm sure
people are a bit afraid. And when you have so many dead people in a city, then you know somebody who knows somebody who died. So now we have a government who asks for more power to fight against terrorism. They want to. The president just asked to change the constitution, and this is what I'm a bit worried. I think, of course, terrorism. We should fight against terrorism, but I hope we don't lose too much of our freedom. And I just want to add, like, as a French citizen, I really appreciate all this outpouring of sympathy. It was surprising to see Obama to make a declaration even before our president after the attacks.
Right.
But I want to say as well that there is many terrorist attacks going on, especially one day before Paris there was a very deadly one in Beirut, in Lebanon. And I wish as well that we don't forget that France is not the only country.
We at Newstellers would like to express our deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of those affected by the attacks in Paris and elsewhere. Our thoughts are with you during what must be a very, very trying time indeed. South Korea's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport plans to construct a second airport on the resort island of Jeju in Sinsan-ri Seogwipo City to handle a spike in passengers fueled by tourists. Building an airport in the sparsely populated region of Sinsan-ri would reduce the number of people affected by pollution and be less harmful to the environment. But local residents argue that not only will they be affected by noise, but it will also threaten their way of life. Meanwhile, after a 40-year saga, construction to build a second airport in Sydney, Australia will commence in 2016. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott approved the idea, stating that the new airport will create economic prosperity for the region.
It's good news for jobs, and because of the importance of Sydney in our national economy, it's good news.
But local residents are concerned about the ensuing noise pollution problem, which has yet to be addressed.
As far as noise pollution and air pollution and freedom of movement through Western Sydney, will be devastating consequences that's going to happen to Western Sydney residents. And hopefully the government will reverse this decision in a few years' time, as we saw back in the 90s.
We will have to see whether the expansion will value both the residents' livelihood and support the beneficial outcome of creating a second airport. So over the past few years, Jeju Island has been visited by an increasing number of foreign travellers. So what do you think it is about Jeju Island that's so appealing to foreigners?
Big reason why Jeju Island has had this spike in tourists in recent years is because it has a visa-free policy, especially for Chinese tourists. It's a cheap, close destination for these visitors, and that has really contributed to the increase in air traffic going onto the island.
Okay. Any other reasons?
I think, of course, it's a beautiful island. I really enjoy going there, and now there is a lot of very cheap air flights, especially from Seoul. You can go very easily. Just 1 hour, you're far from the city, you're in a natural environment. And the only thing, I really love Jeju, but I'm a little bit worried by the increasing, the rate of construction. You see more and more condominiums and hotels being built along the coast. And that makes the island less and less beautiful. So I hope the government of Jeju understand that it's important to keep natural beauty the way it is and the natural
What they're
landscape.
famous for as well.
Yeah, once there will be, when the coast, the southern coast is completely covered with golf and hotel, then it will not be so nice anymore.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's difficult because, in Jeju, there are, as you said, there are a lot of construction going on, and the Chinese tourists, they come, and actually they expect to be growing even more. The number of tourists is like 11 million people, and but they think that it will be like 45 million in the next 10 or 20 years. Yeah, because it's located very near to the east of China, and those people, those kind of wealthy people of the east of China, they come for millions. So Jeju is the perfect destination for them, and they go there and they have casinos there too, and some things to enjoy their holidays.
I wanted to mention the gambling angle. I wrote about the gambling industry in Korea a couple of years ago, and it's kind of an interesting position because Korea has almost, in this part of the world, almost a monopoly on gambling. It's not legal in China, and it's not legal in Japan. And so the casino industry in Korea has made a lot of efforts to attract people from those countries. And one person that I interviewed for that story told me that one attractive feature of Jeju is that Chinese businessmen can convincingly tell their wives and whoever else that they're not going away to gamble. They can say like, oh, I'm going to play golf, or I'm just going to like relax. And if they go to Macau, everybody knows. There's no hiding what they were doing in that case. But Jeju provides kind of a convincing alibi.
So both good and bad reasons why Jeju
I'm
Island
not
is so
judging good or
popular.
bad.
But if I want to mention, I don't know if you tried, but there is something you call the Ole trails around Jeju.
Okay.
And I did that. I did maybe 3 or 4 of them, and it's really nice. This is one of the best way to discover Jeju. You go through small villages, you see local people. It's nice way.
Yeah.
Far from the casinos and the love museum that are maybe not so interesting.
So I think there's a bit of something for everyone, whether it's the natural landscape you're looking for or something a bit more fun at nighttime, casinos perhaps. All right, well, obviously not everyone was happy with the news of the second international airport. The local residents are obviously concerned about pollution, noise, the land speculation that often comes with a new facility. There are also growing concerns that it might lead to something like the decade-long dispute over the country's navy construction in Gangjang village. But on the other hand, there are local residents who also support the decision, saying it's appropriate and timely for the increasing number of tourists in the area. So when we have such a controversial and dividing situation, to what extent do you think we should take the opinions of the locals into account?
Well, if we put too much weight into the opinions of locals, nothing like an airport would ever get built. But in this case, I do think an airport is something that really does change the landscape that it goes into. So I would hope that when things like an airport are built, they are built in an area so that they can inconvenience as few people as possible, and they can be put together in ways that are environmentally sound and are respectful of the locals.
And if you look around the Korean countryside, you have a lot of these kind of ghost airports, ghost ports, where barely, you had a local government thinking that they would build an airport and attract all these foreign visitors, and there's barely any flights that go into them. And I know Jeju-do is very popular, it's probably the most popular, but I guess they have to hope that the tourist numbers that they predict that will grow over the next decade actually happen. We don't know what kind of factors will happen with Chinese tourists. Right now they come to Jeju-do because it's near, it's cheap, and they don't need a visa. But if other countries start issuing visa-free policies for Chinese tourists, they might all start going to Okinawa or to Taiwan or whatever. You never know what other destinations could become more attractive over the next several years, and then you see Jeju-do actually losing tourists. Who knows?
About the number of passengers, it is necessary to do something. Yeah, so they were thinking about making this main airport bigger, or just remove it and put a bigger one somewhere else, or do the second airport. So finally they chose the third option because they thought it would be the more viable. But that happened in Spain actually. We have a very long coast in Spain, and it was full of all German and North European tourists. But even if we had like kilometers and kilometers of coast and thousands of villages, there was a moment like in the last decade that the prices went much lower to other countries, to African countries, to Philippines, planes to Thailand, even if they are a bit farther, to Caribbean beaches. So the tourism in Spain decreased, and so we had that phenomenon of ghost airports and some hotels that went empty, and some people that get bankrupt after they constructed like really big resorts. So Jason's point is really interesting.
I think Jeju, like a lot of places that see an influx of tourists, they need to be careful not to lose what draws people there in the first place. Like if Jeju becomes a concrete and gray and polluted place, it's going to lose its appeal for tourists, and it's going to be a self-defeating enterprise.
That's one of the reasons why this new airport is so controversial. But it's not only airports that are controversial, especially abroad as well. There are a lot of government-run projects that are created with the intention to benefit their communities, but face a lot of opposition. So let's talk about similar examples in your own and other countries as well. How did those governments or local councils deal with the opposition from the local residents?
In Canada, there's been a lot of talk about pipelines. In the western part of the country, there is one of the world's biggest environmental catastrophes called the oil sands, which is a energy project of drawing fossil fuels out of the ground, but it's very sandy, so the fossil fuels require a lot of processing. It emits a lot of carbon. And there had been a plan to build a long pipeline from there throughout the U.S. President Obama has been opposed to this, and so the plan is not going ahead now. In that province, I think like the people are quite supportive of the energy industry because it's so important to their economy. But when you have something that's really long and goes through a lot of different places, it's bound to have a lot of resistance along the way. Resistance from people who are not tied to the industry that it comes from. So that's one project that did have a lot of resistance, and at least for now is not going ahead.
Well, in Spain we had a very big controversial issue. They wanted to do some oil prospects in front of Canary Islands, which is a very big touristic place. It's like 7 islands, 2 million people, and they live from tourism. They receive like tens of millions of tourists every year. It's a really natural paradise. It's incredible. I was living there for 2 years, and it's totally incredible. And our biggest oil company, Repsol, was trying to find oil 80 kilometers away the coast of one of the islands, Lanzarote. And every resident in the island was against it, demonstrations, even the local politicians were against it, and there was a really strong resistance. But they kept trying, but finally they realized that the quality of the oil fields was not that good, so finally they gave up on the project, but it was really controversial, and people were totally against it.
Back home in New Jersey, there's a lot of discussion right now about the construction of a third tunnel under the Hudson River that would link northern New Jersey to New York. And the state governments in New Jersey and New York had been, kind of arguing about who would pick up the bill. There has been some traction lately, and it looks like the states will have to come up with, looks like the federal government will support 50% of this project, and the 2 states will have to come up with the rest. But now I think a new tunnel most people would want, going through the Holland Tunnel or the Lincoln Tunnel or even over the George Washington Bridge. You can spend hours in traffic sometime, and that just slows down the economies and your commute time. But now we have to discuss how it's going to be funded. So of course it's taxpayers' dollars. So I read an article recently that suggested that even perhaps New Jersey needs to legalize marijuana and use the taxes to fund the construction of this third Hudson River tunnel. So I mean, there's at least, and I think this is a public works project that benefits primarily locals. I mean, of course, it'll help business, but since the economy of northern New Jersey is so dependent on New York, that I think it's a win-win for everybody. But now it's just about how to actually pay for it. Now is the big question.
In France, we have actually a similar problem that the Jeju's airport. The government wants to build a new airport next to Nantes. This airport will cover all the west side of France, and many people complain because there is already an airport that is working pretty well, and that will destroy natural environment, and many people question the validity of building a new one, especially when you have such a good railroad network. And so far, the government didn't really find a good solution to deal with the protest. Even our own minister of ecology said that she was against the project. So there is disagreement even within the government. So you cannot expect any good solution in sight. It's pretty messy, actually.
Similar thing in the UK. They've been arguing about a third runway at Heathrow Airport for what seems like forever. And I know a lot of people are complaining because when the coalition government came into power a few years back, they promised not to build this third runway, but now the Conservative government, who are fully in power, seems to be going back on their word. So anyway, shall we wrap up our discussion on our first topic of Jeju's second international airport?
Jeju is the island of peace. Let's keep it that way.
Okay.
How many airports can one island handle?
Public infrastructure doesn't always benefit everybody.
I would say Jeju, let's promote the tourism, but keep the environment.
So environment always needs to be taken into consideration, plus local residents as well. So before we move on to our second topic, let's take a look at this video. K-pop star IU's song Zeze has been mired in controversy. The song was inspired by a 5-year-old boy named Zeze in the novel My Sweet Orange Tree. The book's Korean publisher expressed concern over the sexualization of the young character. Experts from various fields have been embroiled in a heated debate, some calling it a freedom of expression, and arguing that taboos exist even in art. Meanwhile, this questionable representation was picked up by The Guardian, a British newspaper, which raised further questions on what is deemed appropriate in regard to freedom of expression and what is not. Whether art should be interpreted based solely on the author's intention or whether our individual interpretation is irrelevant is an area that needs to be explored. So the controversy over the song Zeze has turned into a wider debate about the interpretation of literature, whether we should always go along with the author's original intention or whether we're free to interpret it using our own imagination. So what are your guys' thoughts on this?
Well, let me go on the record here and say pedophilia is bad.
Goes without saying.
But I do think that good art is interpretive. I think that whether it's visual art or music or theater, I think what makes it unique, what makes art special, is that everyone who views it or listens to it or watches it comes away with a different message. Now, of course, there's the matter of taste, which is very subjective. But and I think any author or artist should appreciate that their work has been interpreted in many different ways.
Okay.
Well, I have to say that the Sweet Orange Tree was one of my favorite books when I was a child,
Nice.
and I saw the video and I read the translation of the lyrics of IU, and I don't think there's anything wrong about it. I mean, it's like maybe it can be interpreted as the sexualization of that child, but it's not like that. I think there's some kind of conservative movement that is getting crazy about everything, and now everybody can talk and criticize by internet. So everybody is like criticizing each other and trying to censor each other. So I want to say that I'm totally in favor of freedom of expression. I think that is totally stupid to try to censor an artist for what he or she says.
Well, I think we should also keep in mind that there are plenty more vivid sexualizations of children in K-pop than this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like not even close. Yeah. But of course, the whole point of art is to create some kind of reaction, and that people react differently depending on their own, emotional and their own background and who they are, and to have some kind of conversation, to have one piece of art that can be a sort of shared experience for people to discuss things. And yeah, I think that everybody needs to kind of calm down about this. I mean, this is not that big of a deal.
I think part of the controversy was about the artwork. Like the Zeze was represented with a fishnet. So people didn't like it, but I agree with you guys. I think K-pop fans are way too sensitive, and calm down, guys. It's okay.
And also there's one thing that I really regret about IU, and maybe it's because of the needs of her company or whatever, that she apologized.
Yeah.
Why why should you apologize? You do some artwork and they criticize you, you should say like, okay, this is my freedom of expression. I did that, and if you don't like it, it's not my problem.
Well, I agree, but I think nowadays there's this culture of like, if someone is offended by what you said, then no matter what you said, you've done something wrong. And like you have to show some kind of contrition for this person's feelings having been hurt.
And sometimes you don't even apologize for what you say. You apologize for how it was interpreted.
Yeah, exactly,
you say, "Oh, I'm
exactly.
sorry you felt it like this. I'm sorry I hurt you." But
it's like, I'm sorry that this hurt your feelings. That's not what I meant.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
Well, the internet has given way to this kind of mob rule where you have, a relatively few number of internet commenters, netizens as they're known, being very vocal about their opposition to one issue, and that kind of dominates the entire discussion about
K-pop fans especially are so unforgiving. Recently, after the attacks in Paris, a couple of K-pop stars, they wrote on their Twitter account, if they wanted to write play for Paris and they made a mistake, they would play, instead of pray for Paris, it was play for Paris, which is really not a small typo, it's not a big deal. And it was a big issue on the internet, fans complaining, oh, this is shameful, you should know how to write English. I mean, come on, it's okay, take it easy.
I think the issue of netizens as a whole.
Yeah, it's a different issue, I agree, maybe we should...
But I think the good thing about this IU case is that I feel like a few years back she would have just been completely condemned. Maybe she'd have to go, hide away for a few years. But I feel like it's brought about discussion, at least, about the interpretation of literature. And a lot of people seem to be on her side. Okay. Taking it from another angle, particularly in Western countries, politics and politicians especially, they are often criticized, satirized in cartoons and whatnot. Whereas in Korea, it's a lot harder to do that, possibly because the defamation laws are pretty severe here. So do you think in Korea and worldwide as well, it's possible in any instances to draw a clear line between art and politics?
Well, I don't think there should be a line. I mean, I think that it's healthy to have some kind of crossover between the two. Well, that kind of reminds me of last year, Rolling Stone magazine had a cover where they had a picture of one of the Boston Marathon bombers. And I think it was taken from one of his social media profiles, but he looks kind of cool. He looks kind of like a rock star. His hair is kind of shaggy. He's got like some stubble. And some people really objected and asked Rolling Stone to pull this issue because they accused them of glorifying somebody who had committed this really violent act. But I think in that case, and both in the case of that you just mentioned, Soo-jung, one thing art really should do, and one thing that is powerful when it does, is question people's assumptions about things. It's like, well, this guy's a terrorist. This guy killed a bunch of people with a bomb, but he doesn't look like one. But then that raises questions of like, well, what does a terrorist look like? And can you judge people based on what they look like? It brings up all these interesting questions. So I think that satire and political cartooning is fantastic. I really like it, and I think it's hugely important.
Yeah, but there is, I agree with you, but there is always lines, even if they're far, there is always things. I mean, in France, we have Dieudonné, which is, he used the cover of humor to propagate hate speech. He said, I'm saying Jews are bad, but this is humor. No, this is exactly what it has. So we have to be careful. And there is a lot of cartoons that are sometimes just offensive without being even smart or funny. So I agree, but humor has to be funny. And there is other, in terms of politics, I think there is one line that I don't see should be crossed, is the line of private life. Even politicians, they have the right of their private life, and I think it's good that they are lampooned and made fun of, but at least their private life, privacy, families should be protected.
Do you think that's possible in such a widely connected society?
I think it's
today?
possible, yeah.
Okay.
That's a very French way of
I kind of feel let the market decide. If it's a horrible piece of art that is overwhelmingly considered as in poor taste, galleries won't let it be displayed. People won't pay to visit it, and I think, I don't know, it's putting a lot of trust in the taste of masses. Well, but I know that's prone to folly, that way of thinking too. But I think it's also one of the more useful ways in determining, what gets publicity or not.
Okay. So I think this line of extremity in art, if there is such a line, is very hazy, given the inherently kind of grey subject matter. All right, shall we wrap up once again with our final headlines for this topic, freedom of expression and its limits?
Art should be left up for interpretation.
Okay.
I was going to say, art must explore all parts of the human experience.
let's try to recover the freedom of art and expression.
Okay, my headline would be, even if it's poor taste, there shouldn't be any limit to freedom of expression.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for your very insightful comments on two very different but interesting topics this week. I hope you enjoyed yourselves.
We did.
As always.
We did, yeah.
Good. We will see you all next week. That's all the time we have for today, but join us next week, viewers, for a whole new global talk show, Newstellers. We will be open for any opinions or requests on our official website as well as our Facebook page.
Well, imagine if Salman Rushdie wrote the Satanic Verses now. No, it wouldn't even get published. And if it did, there would be way fewer people that were coming out to defend him.
You direct your satire upward. You don't criticize minorities.
We have to accept that there are like cartoons and things that humor can be offensive or not, can be good, can be bad.
Last year there was a huge controversy in Paris because there is this artist who built a huge anal plug in the middle of Place Vendôme in Paris. He has the right to build giant butt plugs wherever he wants, maybe not in my city, I don't know.